Hi guys, welcome to this week's episode of Real World Basics. Today we are talking about moving out, the first video in our segment of independence. And moving out really is the first breath of fresh independent air, but there are some personal considerations you need to make, as well as a lot of logistics involved in moving. So we are going to get started today by talking about the lifestyle and financial considerations. So when you think about your finances, you want to ask yourself, can you afford to move out? And if so, how much can you afford for housing? So I have linked a couple of previous Real World Basics videos in the description box below, where we talk about things like monthly budget and managing your finances. So once you make a monthly budget, you'll know how much money you have available to spend on housing or how much more money you need to spend on housing. Then there are a couple of other startup costs associated with moving out. We'll touch on some of them a little bit later in today's video and in next week's video. But things like furniture, kitchenwares, cleaning products, those costs can all really add up, and you don't really think about them when you initially think about housing. So it might be a good idea to do some research on what kind of costs you're looking at for housing startup, and maybe factor that into your housing budget, just so you have a little bit more afforded for it. Then you want to think about the personal considerations. So these are really more of like your lifestyle, your like responsibility levels, because you may dream of like a really specific space, but when you get down to thinking about who you are as a person, it might not be the most appropriate for you right now. So you got to ask yourself is, what are you ready to be responsible for? If, for example, you're still in school, you have like a really heavy course load, you're involved in extracurriculars, you might not feel ready to take on all of the aspects of housing, and you might think living on campus in a dorm is the most appropriate housing for you. And that's really self-aware, and that's really good that you know that about yourself. Another good example is, and this one will play a little bit more on like the financial side, but if you travel a lot or you aren't really home a lot, you might want to consider a much smaller space versus like a large full-size apartment or townhouse or something like that. Because if you're never really home, what are you really paying for? So that's also another lifestyle analysis. And then you also can get a little bit more forward thinking. And maybe you see yourself having pets when you move out, or maybe there's like kids. So you could consider finding a place that's more friendly to them, or like a slightly bigger space that'll let you accommodate all of the different feet in your household. So once you do more of like a personal analysis of like what you're ready for financially, emotionally, mentally, then you have a better picture of what sort of housing you're looking for. So to start looking for housing, where do you look? There are a couple of different ways to find housing. You can check sites that are very reputable for housing, like Zillow or apartments.com is another really good one. There are also pretty good housing rental spaces on the buy and sell markets like Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace. And then there's also the old-fashioned way. And this one is really more if like, you know, there's a specific area you want to live in, and like it's kind of close to where you are right now. You can drive the neighborhood or walk around looking for the for rent signs. A lot of places that are a little bit more mom and pop, meaning they're not managed by like a big rental agency. They might not do the online postings, and they may just put a sign in the front yard or in the window advertising a for rent space with like a phone number on it. So if you do the old fashioned way, make sure you bring pen and paper with you to write down phone numbers. Then you want to think about, well, what type of housing are you looking for? There are a couple of different types, and the level of involvement, costs associated with them kind of increase as you go up. But you have living in a dorm. You can rent a room in an apartment or a townhouse or a house. And that one is usually pretty inexpensive. And renting a room, it's likely that the space will come furnished too, especially if it's in a house, because they'll have furniture in the house as well as like kitchenwares and stuff like that. You can get an apartment. Apartments come in lots of different sizes. You can get like a studio apartment, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 3 bedroom. And apartments can be like that mom and pop where it's just like an apartment in a house, or someone like renting out their like basement apartment or the apartment over the garage. Or like there's big apartment complexes where it's just multiple buildings of apartments managed by a big rental agency. So you can also get a duplex, which is just, or a triplex, which is a house split into different segments. So it's kind of similar to a townhouse, I guess. But then you can also rent houses. And then you want to think about what type of utilities you need, what type of amenities the housing comes with. So amenities are like add-ons. Is there a washer or dryer in the unit you're renting? Is it on premise? Like, is it in the basement or in like a little separate building? Is there parking available? Is it, or is it street parking? Some places will have like a little parking lot, or with little decals, or it's first come, first serve. Sometimes it's a garage. Maybe they'll offer a reimbursement for like a parking garage nearby if you live in the city. That would be another amenity. Some places are real fancy. They'll have pools, gyms, playgrounds. Is there like an outdoor area? Do you get a patio or a balcony? Is it pet friendly? Is there like breed restrictions, size restrictions? Is there like a little doggy play area? All different amenities to think about. And then you also want to think about the location. So where are you moving and why are you moving there? Maybe you're trying to be closer to work or to school. Then it really would make sense to try and get as close to those areas as you can. But as you get closer to like primo destinations, it can get quite a bit more expensive to live there. So that may be another factor in your housing search, the kind of proximity to big areas will really drive up the prices. And speaking of costs, there are quite a bit of different costs that go into looking for housing. So for housing, you start with your security deposit and your first month's rent. The monthly rent is obviously the money you pay each month to live there. It's a predetermined amount. It'll be written in your lease. The security deposit is money you pay at the lease signing, and that's going to be held on to by your landlord until the end of your lease, be it 1 year, several years, what have you. And that security deposit is used to pay for any services that the rental unit may need after you leave that are outside of normal wear and tear. So normal wear and tear is kind of the key word here with security deposits. several people will have different opinions on what normal wear and tear are for apartments and rental units. So you want to make sure it's written in the lease what the specific terms are for getting your deposit back. There are other things to consider in housing costs, like your utilities. Those are going to be things like your natural gas. Maybe you have a gas stove and oven, your water, your trash and sewage, electricity, cable, internet, things like that. If you're renting, some places will include utilities with the monthly rent costs. Those are usually like water, trash, and sewage. Some places will throw in like cable or Wi-Fi if they already have it. But you should expect to have to pay for some level of utilities. So when factoring your housing costs and how much you can afford each month, it might be a good idea to do research on what the average utility costs are in your area. That way you can better plan for your monthly budget. Other costs for housing are stuff that's associated with pets. So a lot of rental agencies will charge you either a pet fee or a pet deposit up front when you sign your lease if you're moving in with larger animals like dogs, maybe even some cats. And you do want to double check when you sign your lease and they say pet deposit. You need to figure out, again, what the specific terms are for getting your deposit back, and to ensure that it is actually a refundable deposit instead of just a fee you're paying. Some places will also charge pet rent each month in addition to your regular monthly rent. So another cost consideration to take into account. And then there are some random other ones like lawn care. Maybe you like rent in a house or a duplex and they're like, well, for a flat amount each month, we'll have this person come out, take care of the lawn. Otherwise, you can do it yourself. You may just pay the cost associated with the regular lawn care. Or maybe there's like maintenance fees you have to pay if you live in like a larger rental complex. So like maybe there's like a home association HOA fee that you have to pay for like communal spaces. Maybe there's like a fee for keeping up the communal pool, or maybe you pay to get your air filters changed, things like that, just like other miscellaneous costs associated with like a specific housing situation you're looking at. So all of these costs will go into your house hunting search. So it's important to do lots of research on all of the different and specific costs that you'll need to pay when looking for a house. So hopefully your research in finding housing has come up successful and you found some good places to tour. When you actually get there to tour the units, you definitely want to ask questions. I have included some links in the description box about different types of questions to ask when touring a rental unit. I won't go too much into them in this video just because the questions are numerous. There's a lot of questions to ask. But you basically want to ask about as much as you can. The unit's history, the neighbors, the community, all of that you want to ask about, because sometimes what you see is what you get, and if you don't ask about it, you're kind of out of luck if it doesn't work in your favor. You also want to take pictures. That way, if you do end up renting it, you've got definitive proof of what your unit looked like before you moved into it, which are very helpful once you get into things like normal wear and tear arguments at the end of your lease. So definitely take pictures before you move in. And then you also want to avoid scams when touring places. You might not be entirely sure how to spot a scam. So I've included another good link regarding scams and rental units. it kind of boils down to two things. One, does it seem too good to be true? Is this a beautiful 4-bedroom, 4-bath house in New York City that is $1,200 a month? That would be awesome if that was true. But again, that's not realistic given the other listings around it. So it's likely that that's a scam. And then you also want to think, does something feel off when you try to tour it? Like, do they not want to meet you in person? Do they want you to send money before you even look at the place? Like, they want you to move in without ever seeing it. Um, or like the listing has a bunch of errors in it. They don't screen applicants, and maybe they um, have like a really vague lease. All of that just screams something's off. So when in doubt, trust your gut when touring a place and don't get caught in a scam. All right, so hopefully in your housing search, you have found a place, you've toured a place, you've liked a place, and hopefully you have signed a lease. The next step is moving in. So next week, we are going to be talking about more of the logistics and considerations to take when moving into a new place. So thank you guys so much for joining me on this week's episode of Real World Basics. As always, if you have any questions about today's video or you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see in upcoming Real World Basics videos, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at the Manassas Park City Library. I have included email and our Facebook in the description box below. I will see you guys next week. Bye.